So one of the nodes that you have available that will help you change this game's space and also some of the visuals in general is something called a tile map node. And you can see that in the scene tree right here. I'm going to select that. And when I did that, you get this bottom panel that opens up that shows you a series of different graphics that you can see in the world, that they've all been divided up into individual tiles. And what you get to do basically with them is, instead of handcrafting different parts of the floor, the ceiling, or the wall, with the tile map node, you can just paint them, essentially. So there's this tool right here, the basic paint tool. I'm going to select, and then I'm going to pick a tile. And then when I go up into the viewport, I can just click and hold and drag any shape I want. So you can build out platforms pretty quickly and efficiently that way. If you've gone a little too wild like mine here, there's an eraser button right here. You can select that and just erase anything that you didn't actually mean or intend to leave on the screen. Don't forget to deselect that eraser, otherwise you might be confused why you can't draw new shapes. Another thing you can do here that I think is great is you can select multiple tiles at once and have them all go on the screen. So for example, this brown block, what if I want the plant on it as well? I can just click on the plant and drag down to this block as well. Now both are selected, and when I place it, I get the plant as well. So that's great. And there's different tools here to explore to help you create your create your platforms with the tiles faster. And also there's some patterns here, if I click on this option, that are some pre-built bigger platforms that you can use to make your world even more efficiently using those. Okay, so that's how you can add to the world. You can also change the sort of color palette of the world by going over to the inspector panel when I have tile map selected, and where it says tile set, I can load in a few different ones. This particular project has a few for you. So if you hit this down arrow next to the tile set file, then you select QuickLoad, you get brought to 4 different options, 3 additional options of tile sets that are going to be the same shapes but different color. So let's load a different one. Okay, so now we change the aesthetic. Awesome. Oh, and I forgot, one other thing you can do is, besides just changing the tile map entirely by swapping out a whole new set, you can also just change the tint of different objects in the game. So if I look over here under tile map, we can stick with that first, and I go to the inspector. Under this category of layers, I can see the word Modulate, and that actually is referring to the tint of the objects in the tile map. So if I click down here, I can see different ways and options here for changing the overall tint of that set of tiles. I can do the same thing. Let me undo that. I can do the same thing for other objects in the space. Like I have the background scene over here that has its own bundle of nodes that makes this background here, this parallax background. But when I click on that in the inspector, I can see a tint option right here at the top, and I can click on that and alter that background as well, separate from the tiles. And to explore modding and changing the different components in the game, I would just start with the scene tree in the top left. And first, looking at modding things rather than adding necessarily, I would just click on some of these components. I know that there's coins here in the game. If I click on one of the coins, that's this one here, you can see it highlighted. If I look over in the inspector, I have things like the tint of the coin that I can change. I can make it red. I'm going to do that now. I also see that if I go down a little bit, under transform, I can change the size or scale of things. I'm going to make it really big, just so we can see it. Boom. So I've modded that coin. I can drag that around and put it where I want. I also have platforms that I can look in the top here and see what can be changed. Some of them are dynamic and they fall when you jump on them. So you can change the amount of time it takes for that to happen. I have enemy players here, and I have different choices here for the enemy to make them scarier or less scary. And I also can change with the player the visual appearance of the player. So if I click on that player, I do have speed and jump velocity that I can explore. And visually, I can click this down arrow and change the actual look of the player. So let's first make the player a little bit bigger so we can see. The player is currently red. So let's go back up and go to this down arrow next to the sprite frame and click QuickLoad. And I get these options. Two of them are for the flag, because you can do the same thing to the flag. But these bottom ones are all for the player. So I'm going to change them to green. Oh, he's got a totally different look too in that. Awesome. But if I do want to add things, not just change the things that are already there, I can definitely do that. If I go back to the scene tree again, and let's take this giant coin here that we've made, and I'm going to right-click on that coin and select Duplicate. You can also do that by pressing Control and D. So now I have a second one of them. I'm going to take that coin, I can move that wherever they were on top of each other, but I can move that wherever I want. And just one thing to note, that even though it's a separate looking coin that you copied, some parts of this coin you can change on their own and it won't change the other coins. But because it's a copy of or a duplicate of this one, there are some parts, some resources that it shares with this coin that if you tried to change, it would change for all the coins in the game because they all came from one coin scene. So in this case, I think I can get away with changing the coloring or things on this top level here with just coin selected. Like the size, I can make it a little smaller. But I think if I were to go into the actual scene and change this collision shape, for example, then that would alter the collision shapes of all the coins. So if I do this, just to make it a big example, and I come back out, oh my God, you can see. So just be careful while you're duplicating things, whether you're dragging scenes from down here or right-clicking and hitting duplicate. Some things you can change, and they'll be just about the one you copied, and other things will change for all. Okay, and lastly, for the categories of rules, challenge, or even some of the mechanics of the world, I would direct your attention to this game logic scene here in the main scene tree. And you have things like different wind conditions, challenges, and even a world property of gravity. So I know under the player scene in the scene tree, you had speed and jump velocity, but you also have gravity here that you can change. So that's about it. Those are just hints for different ways that you can mod this according to some of the core elements of a game.